Well, hello, how are you? It's just gone 9 o'clock here in Portstewart in Northern Ireland, where we're still in lockdown during these extraordinary times. I hope you're safe and well wherever you are. And I'm continuing my weekday evening bedtime lockdown book readings, where I've been working my way through my coming of age memoirs, Paperboy, Bread Boy, and All Grown Up. And we're up now to All Grown Up. And it's my 18 to 21 year old, that sort of age group. And I'm going to continue with that tonight. I should mention that if you're enjoying these and you missed Paperboy and Bread Boy, they're all uploaded onto my YouTube channel now. So my YouTube channel is Paperboy Belfast. So if you do research for that on YouTube, you'll find all of these if you want to catch up on them. So anyway, this evening I'm going to read from chapter 4 of All Grown Up, and I'll stop in the middle to say hello to people here saying hello to me as well. So here we go. Chapter 4, Moving On. Hello, said Mommy, picking up the telephone. Och, yes, dear, she continued in her best Gloria Honeyford voice. I'll just fetch him for you now. Tony! My mother was being so polite, it seemed that either Mrs. Thatcher or the Queen had called. As I approached the hall, she put her hand over the mouthpiece of the phone and whispered, It's Aaron Ward from school. His daddy's a dentist, you know. Yes, I know, I said, rolling my eyes. Every time I mentioned Aaron Ward's name, my mother said, His father's a dentist, you know. I bet if Aaron mentioned my name in his house, no one in his family ever said, His father's a foreman in the foundry, you know. About you, Aaron, about you. Well, did you get in? Aye. Class, are you sharing? Digs? Aye. Aye. This was good news. Aaron had got a place on a new course about computers in the new University of Ulster, and we had just agreed that we were going to share something called Student Digs, which basically meant neither of us would have to live alone. I was relieved that at least one of my mates from school wasn't going to Queen's or England, because now I would have one existing friend to start my first year of university with. I always got on well with Aaron, even though he was brilliant at sport and he thought my head was cut. Here, if we got a flat in Portstewart, we can play Pac-Man in the Museys every day and eat Knickerbocker Glories and Morelli's, I said excitedly. What are you like, wee lad? Replied Aaron. When I informed my mother that I was going to be sharing a flat with Aaron Ward, she was on the phone to my Auntie Doris almost immediately. Our Tony's going to be sharing a house with Aaron Ward. His father's a dentist, you know. So what? Dad shouted from the living room where he was watching a film about Jacques Cousteau finding fascinating fish on BBC Two. All your man does is look down people's gobs all day. Our search for accommodation proved to be more difficult than Aaron and I had expected. I couldn't afford the halls of residence, and Aaron had secured a place on his course too late to get a room there. So one day, Aaron borrowed his father's Rover, and we travelled up the motorway to Coleraine to explore our options. My disappointment at not being able to afford halls was considerably reduced when we arrived at the university. The halls of residence reminded me of the Weetabix flats on the Shankill Road, and they were being demolished because they were deemed unfit for human habitation. We visited the Students' Union to get housing advice and met Conor O'Neill, who was wearing a Tyrone Gaelic football tracksuit. Conor explained that he lived in a flat near the train station in Portrush because the bedrooms and halls were smaller than the minimum size of a prison cell under the Geneva Convention, and this was typical of Thatcher's Britain. Ooh, Thatcher, that woman, he said as his rosy cheeks went an even deeper shade of red. Ooh, Thatcher. We thanked him for his advice and took away a list of rental properties to explore in Coleraine, Portstewart, and the nearby seaside resort of Portrush. This North Coast region was known locally as the Triangle because the three towns were located on the points of a geographic triangle. This use of geometric shapes to describe a neighbourhood appealed to me, and I wondered if the Falls and the Shankill, with the peace wall dividing the two parallel roads, could become known as the parallelogram. Aaron and I stopped at a rusty red telephone box and made a few viewing appointments for lettings that were within my price range. I knew that Aaron could probably afford to pay more than me because his father was a dentist, but he seemed happy enough to try to find something habitable and affordable enough for both of us. Our first stop was an 8-bedroom terraced house in Portrush, which was a few miles along the coast from Portstewart. Portrush was there where you went on Easter Monday on the train and hoped there were no fights between drunks in your carriage on the way home. It had never occurred to me that people lived in Portrush all year round and not just in caravan sites in July. Before entering the first property, the landlord explained through bad breath that we would be sharing with 6 other lads and that if any one of us broke anything, all 8 of our deposits would be withheld. He then told us that he hoped we were not on drugs and showed us several damp bedrooms with stained mattresses on old-fashioned beds and wardrobes with woodworm. Finally, he told us it would cost us £30 per week, more than twice what I could afford on my student grant, and that we would be evicted if we paid late, and he hoped we would come to know the Lord Jesus Christ as our own and personal Saviour. I didn't bother to explain to him that I was already saved, because he probably would have demanded proof of my spiritual credentials, and having seen his pagan property, I just wanted to leave him alone. Thanks very much. We'll think about it, Aaron said politely, presumably referring to both the accommodation and the Lord. I feel sick, I said to Aaron once the landlord left us with 3 pages of house rules. I'm not sleeping on no pissy mattress in a dirty hole like that. I'd rather sleep in a tent. I'm serious. I think a tent might just blow away up here, Hiawatha, replied Aaron. After several more visits to similarly stinking properties with equally obnoxious landlords, I began to lose heart. Nobody had warned me about this. I thought the main strain in going to university would be of an intellectual nature. No one told me you had to live in a dump. In Belfast, if you didn't go to university and got a good job in the bank and still lived at home with your parents, you were expected to put some money into the house for your keep. But your mommy still did the shopping and the washing and cooked your dinner. I was realising that student life was going to be much harder than I had expected. After an exhausting day of disappointment, I suggested that Aaron take his father's car onto the beach for a laugh, but he declined as he had heard that stupid Egypts got their cars stuck in the sand there all the time. They do not, I exclaimed with as much as incredulity as I could muster. Some people are as thick as champ, aren't they? As Aaron and I travelled home, we discussed whether we would ever find somewhere decent to live in the Triangle. If we had a TARDIS, I posited, we would have plenty of room because it's bigger on the inside than the outside, and we could travel in space and time and arrive in Coleraine before we left Belfast, and we could go back in time if we missed one or didn't understand everything the first time. What are you like, wee lad? Said Aaron. A few days later, Aaron's father came to the rescue, as if our accommodation problem was a rotten tooth requiring a root canal. Mr. Ward must have put out the word on the dentist grapevine that his son needed accommodation in the Triangle and that a reduced price would help accommodate his son's wee friend who didn't have an awful lot. The reward for such a deal would be the use of the Ward's holiday apartment in the Algarve. It was unfortunate that my father had previously sold our caravan in Malahide, as I was certain access to our holiday home in County Down would have made the offer even more enticing. This time, I borrowed the green Simca, and Aaron didn't laugh at it too much when I collected him from his big house up the Antrim Road. Naturally, he had a flowering cherry tree in his front garden. I had never been to the toilet in Aaron's house, but I was convinced his bathroom had an avocado bidet. This time, when Aaron and I arrived in Portstewart, several friendly homeowners gave us a cup of tea and a digestive biscuit before showing us around nice summer holiday homes with radiators in the bedrooms. During one such tour, the landlord had a moment of enlightenment. "I know the place for two boys like you," he said. "Mrs. Flood takes a couple of good living students every year, and her house is lovely. She'll even make your dinner for you." I liked the sound of this immediately, although Aaron seemed a little perturbed to be placed in the same good living category as me. The man called Mrs. Flood to arrange an appointment, and within an hour, Aaron and I were ringing the doorbell of the Strand Beach guest house and admiring the view of the Atlantic Ocean from the front step. A well-dressed older lady with big glasses, kind eyes and a friendly smile answered the door and looked us up and down quickly before inviting us inside for a cup of tea and a slice of Battenberg cake. Mrs. Flood's living room was bigger than the whole downstairs of my house, with huge windows overlooking the sea and a giant potted plant in the corner. The walls of every room were covered with expensive-looking wallpaper, and the entire house was bereft of wood chip. Aaron and I had a lovely chat with Mrs. Flood and learned that she was a widow with two dogs and one grown-up daughter who still lived at home, but all three were presently out for a walk on the beach. I wondered exactly how grown-up her daughter might be, and knew Aaron was thinking the same thing. Mrs. Flood explained to us that she enjoyed the company of students as long as they were no bother. We assured her that we would be no bother at all. Aaron explained that he played rugby and cricket and was from his father was a dentist, you know. I added that my father worked in industry, and I was a Sunday school teacher from quite close to the Antrim Road, and I enjoyed the theatre. We had no bother written all over us. Mrs. Flood told us that being away from home for the first time wasn't easy, and we would probably need a bit of looking after. I couldn't believe it. We had found a mammy in Portstewart. Then Mrs. Flood showed us into what would be our shared bedroom. It had a double bed for Aaron, a single bed for me, a desk for Aaron to study at, and a wee table for me. Our room had an ensuite bathroom that was bigger than our bathroom at home, even after Daddy had knocked down the wall between the toilet and the bath with the sledgehammer he had borrowed from the foundry. The bathroom suite and wallpaper were all a bit too pink for our taste, and the toilet had a doily ballerina toilet roll holder on top of the cistern, but I was certain we would cope with this minor discomfort when Mrs. Flood explained that the cost was only £10 a week, including our breakfast and dinner. We were landed. So I'll tell you more about that in a wee minute. In the meantime, I'll say hello to whoever's saying hello. Hello, ready for the new antics, says Kenneth Glenville. Hope you're enjoying them, Kenneth. Hi, Jim Poole. How are you? Good evening, Evelyn Brown. Hello, Norma Fleming. All the regulars, good to have you along. Hi, Angela Montgomery. Evening, Tony. Enjoying All Growed Up. Angela and Keith, lovely to have you along again. Hello again, Donna Hunter. Hope you're well. Hi, Betty O'Riordan. Hope you're doing well too. Hi, Nigel McComb and Anne Kirk. Good evening, Susan Wilgarn, never misses, and Niamh Sahafian. Lovely to have you along again, Niamh. Good evening, Norma Sloan, also a regular. Hi, Tony. My name is pronounced Aline. Aline, you said it pretty good. Oh, right. I did have a teacher called me Alien for 5 years. Well, as you know, I like aliens, but okay. No, I got it right. So Aline's correct. Good. It's lovely to have you again, Aline. Hi, Sadie Hannah. I'm glad you're listening again. And Norma Fleming said, "What a lovely name." She's admiring your name, Aline. Hi, Francis McGrath. Mark McCauley says, "Collies was such an emotional time, even though it was different times and different places." Yes, I'm glad you're relating to it from over there in the States, Mark. Robbie Lee, you learned to drive in your Grandis Simca too. It was a great wee car. They don't make them like that anymore. They were a bit more stylish than a Lada, but not quite as expensive. That's what I remember about them. Excellent, says Michael McKinley Sr. Good evening, Dee Smith, and hi, Davy Calder. Good to have you along. So we'll keep going. and I'll continue the story of my move to university. A few short weeks later, I had packed my bags and moved out of our home. I was permitted to use the Simca for a Saturday to transport all my worldly goods from my Belfast bedroom to my new room in Portstewart. I packed 2 suitcases of clothes and a box of books and filled several Stewart supermarket bags with various other essentials, such as my new Sony Walkman, my music cassette collection, my digital clock radio, and a half-full bottle of High Karate aftershave. While I was packing the car, I heard the familiar diddly-ding of the Ormo Mini shop and gave Leslie a wee wave when he stopped outside Mr. Black's house. 2 soda and a packet of Fly's Graveyards, and hurry up in the name of blazes, shouted Mr. Black from his front step. This was one part of customer service that I did not miss. Come here till I tell ye, said Leslie. There's a situation down the road. Take it easy now, we're not doing too bad, so we're not. I'll send the wee lad over in a minute. Young Mark leapt down the steps of the van with great enthusiasm. I was shocked at how quickly my mantle of the wee lad had been appropriated. Once the boot and back seat of the Simca were full, I returned to my bedroom for a final check in case I'd forgotten anything essential, like my passport or my Clearasil spot lotion or my well-thumbed Good News Bible. The room was not completely bare because I knew I would be coming home every other weekend to have my clothes washed and to stock up on tins of yellow-packed baked beans. However, as I stood at the door and looked inside, it seemed as if my personality had already departed. The sellotape, which had held up my Agnetha poster for years, had torn off some of the woodchip wallpaper. I sighed as I remembered all the nights I'd gone to bed feeling warm and safe in this wee room. Even those nights when I could hear shooting outside and the sound of bombs exploding down the road. As I reflected on my happy childhood, I realised my mother was standing behind me, observing my room. She was crying, so I gave her a big hug. After all those years of her comforting me when I skinned my knees or my big brother decked me, it felt as if I was comforting her for the first time. Sure, I'll be back at the weekends with my washing, I reassured her. But it'll never be the same, she said, drying her eyes as she always did when she realised there was nothing she could do about something sad, like when they axed Meg Richardson from Crossroads. You be careful up there now, won't you? Sure, I'm always careful, Mummy. Aye, but your head's in cloud cuckoo land half the time, love. Well, as Granny would say, I'm all growed up now, so I am. I felt like Bobby Ewing reassuring Miss Ellie after Jock had died in a mysterious plane crash in South America. I gave wee Betty another big hug and a kiss on the cheek. Don't you worry about me, Mummy, I said, knowing fine rightly she would worry about me anyway. When I left the house that day, my whole family came out to the front step to wave goodbye. My father put his arm around my mother as they waved. My wee brother looked on solemnly from his skateboard, and my big brother spat out his chewing gum, rolled it into a missile, and fired it at the green Simca as I drove off. This only emphasised the magnitude of the change that was taking place in my life. I was leaving home, so I was. So there you are. That's chapter 4 of All Growed Up. So glad you could join me this evening. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll be back same time tomorrow night for chapter 5, and hope you can join me again then. Until then, do stay safe, stay home, and stay positive.